I never thought it would feel like this. So charged, so impossible, and yet unavoidable. Every time he's in the room, something shifts. A glance, a brush of a hand, the way he laughs at my jokes like he really sees me. It makes my chest tighten, my pulse spike, and my mind betray me. I tell myself it's nothing. He's just my son's friend. He's young. He doesn't belong here, not like this. And yet, when we're alone, even for a moment, I feel it. The pull, the electricity that shouldn't exist. I know the line. I know my vows, my life, my commitments. But it feels thinner than it ever has. Fragile. Every conversation lingers too long. Every touch is too deliberate. Every pause stretches too far. And with every heartbeat, I wonder, am I relieved that nothing has happened? Or am I disappointed that it hasn't? He calls me by my name differently now, softly, almost intimate. And I don't know how to stop noticing, how to stop imagining. It started innocently enough, or at least I convinced myself it did. He came over that evening, the way he always did when my son needed help with some project or assignment. I had prepared snacks, straightened the living room, and tried to ignore the hollowness that had been settling into me for months. My husband had been distant, wrapped up in work and his own world, and I had grown accustomed to the quiet that stretched through the house, heavy and lonely. He was early, which meant I was there before anyone else, straightening the cushions again, smoothing the corners of the throw. When he walked in, he smiled, casual but deliberate, like he belonged in a way no one else did. Our hands brushed as I handed him a glass of water. Just a brush, a fleeting contact, but it sent a jolt through me. I cursed myself silently for noticing, for letting my body react to something so insignificant. We sat in the living room, talking about my son, about schoolwork, about nothing at all. His presence filled the space, an easy warmth that was hard to ignore. He laughed, and the sound lingered, making my shoulders tense without me realizing it. When I laughed in return, it felt hollow at first, then genuine, and I found myself leaning slightly toward him, drawn in by something unnameable. At some point, he shifted closer to reach for a pen I had dropped. Our knees touched. I froze for a fraction of a second, aware of how dangerously intimate it felt, how aware I was of the simple geometry of our bodies. I reminded myself, he was my son's friend, a visitor. I was a married woman. But the thought came anyway, quiet, intrusive, and I had no defense against it. He caught my gaze across the coffee table, a small, knowing smile tugging at his lips. My throat went dry. The room seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us. Breaths became louder, more deliberate, every pause loaded with unspoken tension. I told myself it was harmless, that it was only my imagination, that the world hadn't changed. Yet the pull of proximity, the thrill of attention, and the vulnerability I carried made each moment feel heavier. When he left that night, I lingered near the doorway, longer than necessary, feeling the absence of him like a weight. My chest ached. My mind replayed every glance, every brush of hands, every laugh. I knew I should feel relief that nothing had happened, but instead, a quiet disappointment settled over me, as though I had glimpsed a dangerous door and then stepped away only because fate intervened. And even as I closed the door behind him, the echo of that room, that tension, stayed with me, sharper than any reminder of my vows. After that night, I couldn't stop replaying it. Every detail, The way his hand lingered near mine, the warmth in his gaze, the way the air had felt heavier when we sat too close, haunted me. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was imagining things, that it had meant nothing. But my thoughts betrayed me, drifting to him at the most mundane moments. When I was folding laundry, washing dishes, even when I sat alone with a cup of tea. Then, the visits became slightly longer. He'd linger in the living room while my son showered or changed, and I felt my chest tighten every time the space between us shortened. I caught myself brushing against him accidentally, or so I told myself. A knee touched his, a hand lingered on the counter as he passed. Each time, my mind screamed to stop, to step back, to remember my husband, my vows, my life. And yet, I didn't. My body leaned toward him, my eyes sought him out, my smile softened in a way I hadn't allowed for years. I began rationalizing these moments. I told myself he was just kind, attentive, considerate. He listened when I spoke about things I hadn't voiced in years. My frustrations, my insecurities, the loneliness I'd carried in silence. He didn't judge. He didn't lecture. He simply noticed me. It felt like a balm I hadn't known I needed. And with every interaction, my defenses crumbled a little more. One evening, we were alone in the kitchen, the rest of the house quiet. He leaned on the counter near me while we discussed something trivial, a book my son had been assigned. I became acutely aware of his proximity. The heat from his shoulder, the faint scent of cologne, the way his fingers stepped absent-mindedly, close enough to brush mine. I caught myself imagining what it would feel like to rest my hand against his, just for a moment. My mind slammed on the brakes, and my chest tightened, not from desire alone, but from the awareness of how wrong it was. We lingered in that silence longer than necessary. Every inhale and exhale seemed magnified, his presence filling the room until it felt like the walls themselves were pressing in. I found myself explaining away my fluttering pulse, my shallow breaths, as if he couldn't see through the careful facade I wore. Yet I knew he could. The glances, the way he leaned just slightly closer when I spoke, the unspoken curiosity in his eyes, he was aware, and so was I. By the end of the evening, when he left, the tension followed me upstairs. I closed the door to my bedroom and sank against it, heart hammering, mind racing. Every rational thought collided with a quiet, undeniable longing. I hated myself for feeling it, for letting him affect me. And yet, the emptiness of my marriage made it almost irresistible. The line hadn't been crossed, not yet, but every moment, every brush of skin, every shared silence made it feel thinner, fragile, almost fragile enough to shatter. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. The house was quiet, my husband out for work, my son at a friend's sleepover. He had come over to return a book, and for the first time, no one else was around. We sat in the living room, the warm lamplight casting shadows across his face. He leaned back casually on the sofa, and I found myself drawn to him without thinking, aware of the subtle heat radiating from his presence. I offered him a drink, and when our hands met over the glass, I froze. It wasn't just the contact. It was the electricity that followed, the slow, almost imperceptible pause that stretched too long. Our eyes held, unblinking, each of us aware of the tension that hummed between us. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my breath catching, as every rational thought collided with the silent desire simmering beneath. He leaned in slightly, just enough that I could feel the warmth of him, close, dangerously close. My mind screamed at me to move, to step back, to remember everything that mattered. My husband, my vows, my life. And yet, my body betrayed me, leaning in without permission, lingering in the magnetic pull that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The room contracted, our breaths mingling in the fragile air, every second stretching into eternity. Then it happened. A sudden jolt that shattered the suspended moment. The front door clicked open. My heart lurched. My son's friend froze, his gaze snapping toward the noise. My son's laughter echoed from the hallway, and I stumbled upright, flustered, my pulse hammering in my ears. The fragile tension evaporated in an instant, replaced by the stark reality of the house, the life I was tethered to, and the line I had nearly crossed. He left quickly, his calm demeanor replaced by a subtle restraint I hadn't seen before. I closed the door behind him, my chest heaving, my mind spinning. Every rational thought I had relied on to maintain distance now felt inadequate. I replayed the moment, over and over, heart sinking and rising with guilt and something far more complicated. A quiet ache, a dangerous longing that wouldn't leave me. I sat alone in the living room long after, the shadows stretching across the walls, the echo of that almost touch lingering. Nothing had happened, and yet everything had changed. The line remained intact, but it was thinner now, fragile, taut, and ready to snap at the slightest provocation. I didn't know whether to feel relief or disappointment, only that the silence had become louder, heavier, more impossible to ignore. And even as I tried to push it away, I knew this wasn't over. The pull, the tension, the proximity, all of it had shifted something inside me. Something that might never be the same. The night left me hollow and hyper-aware. Every memory of him etched in sharp contrast against the quiet of my home. Nothing happened, yet the intensity lingered. The heat of proximity, the weight of what could have been, and the fragile line I had come dangerously close to crossing. I felt both relief and an unsettling craving, as if a part of me had tasted danger and could not forget it. I moved through the following days with a heightened awareness, replaying every glance, every pose, every subtle touch. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had only grown quieter, waiting. The risk, the temptation, the forbidden closeness, all of it had left a mark, one I couldn't erase, no matter how hard I tried. If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever felt the pull of proximity and desire in impossible circumstances, share your experience in the comments. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. There's more to explore in the fragile edges of human emotion and temptation.